here. We thank those who have stepped up in leadership for this community and for us here. And tonight, I am retired now from Carmel Christian Church, which is right across the street. And I'm glad to be here as a moderator. We will make sure that this event is over by 7 o'clock. We will have a time for some questions that I'll be asking our two participants and leaders here of the Hindu and Jewish faith. And then we will invite you to have a question and answer that we'll have some dialogue together with after that. So first, I just want to invite each one of you to introduce yourself, kind of say a little bit about who you are and your organization, because a lot of people don't know who the JCRC is and or the community that we're a part of. And so please, let's do that. Thank you so much, Reese.
Sure. My name is Risa Friedman. Once upon a time, I was a lawyer. I referred to myself as a recovering attorney. And the gig I have now is so much better and so much more fulfilling. I work at the Jewish Community Relations Council, and I am the student-to-student coordinator there. I have the honor and privilege of working with our 10th through 12th graders. We train them, and we go into public, private, parochial schools, church youth groups, any other venue that will have us. And the kids talk about Judaism. They explain about our holidays, our rituals, the kosher laws. We do talk about some sad topics, anti-Semitism, the Holocaust. And we end our presentation on a high note with one of our commandments, Tikkun Olam, to repair the world, something that is so common to everyone's faith that is gathered in this room. And it's quite an honor and privilege to be here. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was raised conservative Judaism, leaning a little bit towards Orthodox. We've been here in Indianapolis, my husband Todd and I, for 35 years. It went fast. And we are now members of, and have been members for 34 years, of Indianapolis Hebrew Congregation. And I'm a past president of that sisterhood.
Namaste, my name is Susmita Singh. I am a member of a social cultural organization called Hindu Sangh. And my job is to coordinate the activities of that organization within Indiana and Kentucky region. It has about 6 chapters in these 2 states. And then it also has 3 youth chapters in all 3 universities, Purdue, IUI, and IU Bloomington. And what is it that we do? We meet every Sunday, we play games, and we learn about our values by playing games. It's an interesting way of doing things. You're all invited. You don't have to be a follower of any religion at all to attend it. It's essentially a program for building character, building values, so that our children can grow up and be well-adjusted adults and positively contributing members of the society as proud Hindus.
I love the statement of Namaste, the greeting that is in the Hindu tradition. It was a new one for me. The Namaste means I bow to the divine within you as you bow to the divine within me. It's beautiful. In the Christian tradition, we might say we pass the peace of Christ within each of us. And in different traditions, giving shalom in the Jewish tradition. But Namaste is beautiful in seeing the divine within each of us. So tonight, our discussion is going to be on really the role of women in the Hindu and the Jewish traditions. And first, I'd be interested in how you have perceived the evolution of women in your tradition, maybe the role of how your grandmothers saw that, and how that has evolved. Because the women's role in each of our faith traditions, I think, has kind of evolved. And so share a little bit about that.
Well, Judaism has 3 main branches. There's the Orthodox, which follows our holy text, the Torah, which you may know as the Old Testament, follows it very strictly. There's conservative, which conserves a lot of those traditions, but modernizes them some. And then there's Reform, which is really driven by social justice, compassion, repairing the world, and we also preserve a lot of traditions too, but we have a more modern, integrated spin on them. And in Orthodox Judaism, traditional Judaism, the women's role was really primarily a wife, mother, the keeper of the household. For most of its history, Judaism has been a patriarchal religious tradition. Women historically, especially Orthodox, have been relegated to lower status. So what does that mean? The way a lot of us, especially Reform and some conservative, would look at it, Orthodox women are discouraged from pursuing higher education or religious pursuits, for example, being rabbis. They have very limited roles in the synagogue. They don't count for a quorum of 10. They don't have the ability to say certain prayers. They can't read from Torah. They can't lead services. And men and women sit separately in the services in the synagogue. Conservative and Reform Judaism have adopted a lot of measures that are intended to equalize positions of men and women. And we've seen changes over time. It wasn't until 1927 when a synagogue in New York City allowed a woman to be elected to the board of directors. And it took much longer than that before women were ordained as rabbis. In fact, it was the women's movement of the 1960s and the 70s that really pushed all that forward. And it wasn't until 1972 that the first American female rabbi was ordained, and that was a Reform rabbi. And there's something that is important to the Indianapolis community. The Reconstructionist Rabbinic College, from the time they opened their doors in 1968, they allowed women to graduate. And in 1973, Indianapolis's own Rabbi Sandy Sasso was the first woman who graduated from that seminary. And both Sandy and her husband, both rabbis, recently retired from Beth El Zedek, have left quite an imprint on this community. And the sanctioning of ordination of women by the conservative and Reform branches of Judaism has created a divide between those two groups and the Orthodox group. And in both conservative and Reform Judaism, now it's commonplace for women to perform all religious duties, responsibilities, and they enjoy every right that has previously been relegated to the domain of men.
I think it's important for people to kind of understand in Judaism, when you have the conservative or the Orthodox, the Reformed to the Reconstructionist, it's a lot of those in the Christian tradition that we have maybe from the fundamentalists, the conservative, the more mainline, the progressive. These are all kind of developments within our faith traditions that have been opportunities for people to evolve in their understanding. So, yes, Rabbi Dennis and Sandy Sasso, Sandy was, some of you maybe who know her from Bethel, this is pretty significant. For them to be a woman rabbi, she took a lot of flack. And for her to break that glass ceiling, if you will, within Judaism has done some wonderful things in that way. So share with us in the Hindu tradition how that role of women has evolved as well, from like your grandmother to where you are today, how you understand that.
Jerry, I'm going to take you a little bit farther than just my grandmother.
Okay.
You see, our history is so vast that 100 years may be a complete history of a country, but for Bharat, which is India, it's just like a blink and a moment in the timeline. I like the word evolve. You know, evolve essentially means that you continuously adapt to whatever the environment throws at you as a challenge, right? So women have actually best utilized that term, evolve. In the Vedic times, which is at least 1500 years before today, they have enjoyed high status. They were involved in philosophical pursuits. They were thinkers, they were scientists, they were warriors, they were queens, able administrators. There is a verse in the Veda which distinctly and specifically mentions to women as a cautionary statement that please do not marry anybody who is intellectually inferior to you, right? So which means that women did pursue great education and knowledge, and therefore they were warned that if you are such an intellectual genius, then please don't marry somebody who's subordinate to you. I'm going to there is no conversion in Hindu Dharma, by the way. You're welcome to assimilate it. So I'm going to say that I'm the representative of a civilization, a philosophy, that the highest scriptures, which are called the Vedas, can anybody guess how many women contributors? And this question is for Hindus also in this. How many women contributors have been mentioned in our Vedas? Their thought has been imbibed in our most superior scriptures. 5? 5?
Around
How many?
10, maybe 10.
Bidding 5, 10?
More than
I can't expect that from you, Sanjaji. 26. Is there any religion in this world that can say that their scriptures have that many women contributing? Right? So, talking about administrators, after 15th century, India has experienced wave after wave of onslaughts. And those waves brought in heroic stories of women queens who fought off these invaders bravely. It's actually a funny story. There was a time when one of the queens, that was the southern part of India, she had a fort, and the fort, usually is built on top of a mountain or a very big or steep elevation. So the invaders, they were of the Mughal dynasty, and they decided that they're going to outsmart the queen, and they sequestered her in her own fort. So the fort has limited supplies, she kept running out of it. She couldn't wage a war, which means because she has limited number of warriors. So she came up with this brilliant plan that she's going to gather all the rocks on the mountain, and they strategically placed it everywhere, and then they started rolling it. So there was an avalanche of rocks, killing thousands of those soldiers, but she didn't stop at that. She got hold of those who were surviving, chopped off their nose, because in Hindu religion, nose is a representation of pride. So if somebody's nose is chopped off, their pride is chopped off. And she sent a message to the Mughal dynasty, the emperor, that look what happens when you try to pull off such a smart stunt. So these are just a few examples that has happened. But during the invasion time, women also played the role of being custodians of the traditions. They hunkered down. They couldn't be allowed to express their full creativity because, there was a lot of perils. Like they could be abducted, their modesty would be at stake. All of those heinous things would happen to Hindu women. But even in that time, the bare minimum, which was a lot that they could do, is that they maintained the Hindu traditions. And that is the reason why today we are still Hindu.
Let me do a follow-up. Is that because in the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition was a patriarch, where really it was more dominant. Are you saying that in the Hindu tradition, that wasn't as that the males weren't as dominant in the role of leadership role, would you say?
See, that's a question that requires a lot of background. But in a very simple answer, I am going to try to explain that in our Hindu marriage, we take 7 steps around the most pure fire, okay? It's called Saptapadi. And every step that we take with our partner, with our husband, future husband, we take a vow that together, as a complement to each other, we're going to pursue all the life's goals. So yes, there is definitely, most of those steps are taken by the men, by the spouse, by the man leading the woman, but eventually the last step is taken by the woman leading the man. So yes, the last three, thank you. So yes, there are moments in time in history where the society became extremely patriarchal. Yes, it is on a spectrum, but then there is always a course correction. There's like, this is not right, this is not right, and Hindu Dharma is more like a self-cleaning oven. Every time society disintegrates, denigrates, it becomes more patriarchal, maybe one of those things, it tries to kind of course correct all the time.
It's interesting, in Judaism, during the marriage ceremony, traditional ceremony, the bride walks around the husband 7 times. So, and it's also, while the leadership structure, like who is part of the priestly class, who's a commoner, is determined patrilineally, it is the women's line for traditional Judaism that determines who is Jewish. So if there's a couple, if there's a Jewish mother and a non-Jewish father, the child is still Jewish. Now in Reform Judaism, the great equalizer, it doesn't matter which parent is Jewish as long as one is Jewish and then the child is Jewish. But I think, this image of women walking around men, I like that. And I remember being quite dizzy myself at the time. But I think it's quite a statement as to we surround, we envelop, we have some control. We have some control. All the control.
Well, and I think it's important to understand at the foundation of our faith traditions, the teachings that value women and men, and each culture is different. Saudi Arabia is different than in India, United States, Mexico, or Canada, and those cultures also affect it. But at the core of the teaching, what I hear is that there is this value and respect of women, how that gets progressed. So I'd be interested in what has been a misconception, and kind of your personal experience from that, as a woman in your faith tradition. What's been a misconception about that, and help us understand that misconception, maybe.
I think from some things that I've read, although traditionally the woman's place is in the home, and she does not have a great leadership role, the home itself is very important. So much of Judaism is practiced in the home. We all, if you're a practicing Jew, your home is filled with all kinds of ritual items. If you were at the program on Saturday evening, Rabbi Kerber did the Havdalah ceremony. We have a Havdalah set sitting on our dining room buffet. We have the Shabbat candlesticks. We have the mezuzahs on the door that contain a sacred prayer and that bless our homes. We have the Hanukkah menorahs. We have calendars with the Jewish holidays and the Hebrew months of the year. So although that might be seen by some, the fact that women control the home, They also control passing on of tradition. They control education. It was my mother that taught me my first prayer, the Shema, an essential prayer of Judaism. It was my mother who made Shabbat vivid for me, and to this day, just the smells of Shabbat dinner when I came home from school, how gleaming the house was. And you know, it was, so women have a very central role there, but some within the kind of schism between Orthodox and conservative and reform on one side, there's something of, it's seen almost as an apology, this explanation of, you know, women, the home is central and women are important. But, you know, there's so much, I mean, we love to interpret our texts, and there's so much difference in interpretations, and that's what's so joyous about it. One of the jokes that we have is 2 Jews in a room, 3 opinions. Sometimes I think it's like 10 opinions, because we can argue amongst ourselves too. But it's that role in the home is really critical, and it's the misconception that it's less, I think should be done away with. I mean, so many, even in like the mystical form of Judaism, the what's considered typically feminine characteristics, intuitiveness, education, mothering, those are all seen as you know, they're feminine, and those are levels of holiness that we aspire to. So there is positivity there. But I know as a child, the synagogue that we went to, although it was very, very much traditional conservative, men and women sat together. And my father was a big proponent of that. It's, you know, sometimes it's when you separate men and women, women were typically put up in a balcony, or sometimes there's like a veil down the middle of the sanctuary separating men and women. And if you're in a balcony, kind of the sound system isn't always great. You can't pray. You can't hear what's going on. You feel there's an exclusion. And my father always said to his 3 daughters, a family should pray together. And I always thought that was just so critical.
One of the things I've appreciated getting to know in the Jewish tradition, that the sense of community and family is so important, especially in the United States, where we have our individualistic kind of, I don't need anybody else, I can do my own thing. And some of Christianity has embraced that. I think the sense of community is really part of that story that's so important. I'd be interested in you sharing a little bit of what are some of the misconceptions that you found, maybe as a woman in the Hindu tradition, but also, you know, from what people don't understand about Hinduism in the United States as well.
Yeah, I think the role of women, the title itself, is one of the biggest misconceptions that I've encountered in the U.S. And of course, something to remember is that, you know, being an ancient faith, much like Judaism, it is complex, it is vast, it has tremendous history. So trying to understand it with just one text, maybe a blurb on the internet, really does not do it justice. There's so much unanswered, leading to more confusion. It's interesting, I was skiing in Michigan, and this 13-year-old girl who's standing next to me, and I know 13 because she spoke about herself, so I was 4. And the first thing that she asked me was that, oh, you're from India, and the second thing she asked me is that, why are women mistreated in India?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I did not know where that came from, but I tried to give her, my best information. Anyway, the first and foremost misconception, and a lot of it I'm going to borrow from Arisa, is about feminism. The Western idea of feminism is that women have to be just like men. Maybe they have to dress up like that, behave like that, do exactly what men do. And that's a little bit comes off as more aggressive and maybe a little bit abrasive also to our culture. Because for us, much like your culture, women are known for, with characteristics of motherliness, of kindness, of intuition, of knowledge, and that really is not identified with anything that's masculine. In fact, prosperity, divinity, and energy and knowledge, they're all the divine feminine manifestations. So that is the first and foremost misconception. And that misconception, and if you were to see some of the images that come out of the news from India, you may be able to identify or relate to what I mean. When India launched the moon craft to the south pole of moon, the only country in the world to have landed there, a lot of the scientists involved in it were women. And if you were to see the images, they were wearing saris, they were wearing their tilak, and just looking very feminine and doing the job that they need to do. A large part of the scientist team that developed the COVID vaccine for India were women. And India decided to distribute that vaccine for free all over the world for those who needed it the most. So such great feats were achieved by women expressing their feminism and not wanting to be like men, but just themselves.
I think that's so beautiful, and for us to understand the feminine energy, the divine of that is so important. And I think for men, I think right now we're seeing in the United States, especially with our president who has this kind of masculine bravado, the old traditional masculine of, we're better than you, we're gonna take over things, we're gonna be stronger than you, we're gonna defeat you. There's part of that in the United States that is that old masculine role, John Wayne role, that some people are drawn to. That's why, Make America Great Again is kind of that idea of go back to the old masculine role. What that misses, I think, is so much of the feminine energy, and that we have, I've always said if we have a woman president, we would never have the dynamics of a lot of the stuff that we have, because men have been caught up in that masculine, unhealthy masculine role. There is a masculine role, I think, that is much healthier. And I appreciate, I think, both of your sharing with us out of your tradition. Even in the Christian tradition, the Holy Spirit is understood as feminine in the Sophia. And that's what we realize in all of our traditions. The feminine energy, the divine is there, but it hasn't got lifted up as much. And so I think that's part of why we're wanting to have you help us understand that feminine energy that is within all of us, even as men or women, and to honor that part of that which is relational, which is the energy of the feminine that is open, rebuilding, creating space, invitation, that honors inclusiveness, right? I think that is so important.
There's one thing that I do want to say about misconceptions. It's the ugly side of what Jews, men and women, experience, and those are the stereotypes. There are some horrible stereotypes out there. I mean, growing up, I was told that I killed Christ. I was called a dirty Jew when I was 8 years old. I was so confused because we took baths every night before we went to bed. I had no understanding of what that meant. And you know, when you come home and you tell your parents these things that were said to you, in my parents' generation and my grandparents, it was like, don't make trouble. Keep quiet, keep quiet. That's not the case anymore. What's happened now with our generation, we are training parents. We are training our kids, like the student-to-student program, about how to stand up and to speak out. And you know, that's something that I think that is what moves cultures forward. And to be brave, to be able to do that, standing up and speaking out, is so important. And I know one thing that our faiths unfortunately have in common too are terrorist attacks that have, you know, I just keep thinking, like you said, if women were running the show, maybe it would be a little different. I'm not sure that, for example, if it was Sarah that was asked to take her son Isaac up to the mountain and sacrifice him, would she have agreed to do that? I don't think any woman that has birthed a child, that has carried a child, could bring themselves to do something like that. I mean, we have such a different vantage point, and I think part of it is too, when people are disrespectful to anyone's faith, we find it offensive. Women find that offensive, and I think women seem to work on many levels all at the same time. The women who developed the COVID vaccine, the scientists that helped launch the rocket, some of them were mothers, some of them did the grocery shopping in their homes and knew where the specials were and what they had to prepare and what meals they had to prepare. Someone was responsible for bathing children, putting them to bed, and to being a loving wife. I mean, women have such, there was that old commercial, I think in the 80s, I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget you're a man. I mean, we are multi-level. Women do not compartmentalize their essence. We are a broad spectrum, and I think that is truly what the strength of women is.
I appreciate that so much, and I think it's important, Reese, that you mentioned about how there was a stereotype perpetuated that the Jews killed Christ. And I think we as Christians who are in this room need to make sure that we help understand that that was not true, that the Jews didn't kill Christ, that there was one religious leader with a Roman leader who were doing that in that day. But because that teaching was perpetuated by the Christian church, that's how our anti-Semitism has perpetuated. And it's our role, I think, for us as Christian leaders, that we need to make sure that we reinterpret that and understand that for our people, because that has done tremendous damage. And I apologize, for that. I feel sad about that. Now, we're going to have a question and answer here in a little bit, but I do have just two questions that I still want to offer for them to share, and then we're going to open it up to you. What was a sacred text or a story that shaped your perspective? A story or a shared text in your faith tradition that shaped a lot of how you understand. Why don't you?
Yeah, that was a difficult question because there were so many women that have been idealized in our tradition. So I sought help from some of my friends who are also leaders of various other Hindu organizations. Hansaji, Dattaji, and Smitaji. After this, you can always ask them more questions. They are more knowledgeable than I am. And the funny thing is that all of us converged on one person. Yeah. I think not because any other story lacked any merit to it. We all had our favorite many heroes, but I felt like this particular story is more modern, and we resonated with that story the most based on what's going on in Hindu lives today. It is a story from the 18th century. It is a story of a queen. Her name is Ahilyabai Holkar. She was the queen of central India. It was a big region. And she lost her husband and her only son at a very young age. So she took up the task of administration of that big region. She was an ardent Hindu, an able administrator, and a beautiful queen. And she took up the task of challenging the mightiest emperor at that time. He was a Mughal emperor, and the Mughals were one of the dynasties of the many Islamic invaders that kind of invaded India. And they kind of subjected among the many heinous atrocities, one of them was systematic destruction of our temples, our ancient temples. One of the centers of Hindu learning was in Varanasi. How many have you heard of Varanasi? It's also known as Kashi. It's just one hand up. I'm like, that's not possible. Okay, more, yes. It's as ancient as Rome, if not more ancient. And it is the sort of like the central core of the Hindu civilization. Among the many millennia that Hindu civilization has been running, we have been visiting that place, filling it with our spirituality. In the heart of that city was a temple dedicated to Shiva. It was destroyed again and again. And she challenged it and she got it rebuilt. It's easy to say that she had it rebuilt, but if you were to put yourself in her shoes, you can imagine that there is an emperor sitting right at your borders, ready to invade you, ready to attack you, ready to do anything that's possible to kind of destroy everything that you have built. But you have taken the task, not selfishly so, but to remain in history as one person who has reconstructed Hindu pride. And that is by reconstructing this mandir. So we all agree that she is our favorite hero.
One of my favorite Jewish heroines is Queen Esther. We celebrate the holiday of Purim not too long ago. This took place in Persia. The king ordered his then current wife to appear before him and his rowdy friends wearing nothing but her crown. She refused. After that, we don't have details about what happened to her, whether she was banished or whether she was done away with. We don't know. But then the king held a beauty pageant to choose another queen. And the queen that was chosen was Esther, the Jew. And things went along fine until one of the king's counselors, Haman, decided to hatch a plan to do away with all the Jews in Shushan, the portion of Persia where the kingdom was. Esther's cousin Mordecai, who had pushed her into the beauty pageant, came to her and said, you have to do something about this. And Esther did. Esther, at peril of losing her own life, uninvited, went into the royal, where the king's throne was, and told the king that she needed to talk to him, and explained what Haman was up to. And the story ends with Haman being the one done away with, and not the Jews. And there's a line in the story that refers to Esther's actions as to what you do in a time such as this. And what you do is you stand up, and you do it at your own peril. And so Esther is definitely one of my favorites. And then of course there's Miriam. Without Miriam, who rescued Moses out of the river and made sure that the Pharaoh's daughter became enchanted by this baby boy and raised him as her own. I mean, she's someone who without Moses, I mean, where would we have been as a group, as a culture, as a religion? And what I also love about Miriam is the joyfulness that she embodies. There's Miriam's song, and Miriam leads the women in dance when they reach the shores of the Promised Land. And so I think that's great. And then in our own times, the women, so many Jewish women were at the forefront of the feminist movement. Betty Friedan, for example. We have the famous sex therapist, Dr. Ruth. So again, women that are not afraid to be outspoken and to stand up.
Well, and I think that's the exciting thing that's happening, you know, with Google or the internet, the knowledge that we have that we see the role of women that maybe didn't get identified or celebrated, that we now can hear the stories. And we see the power of that and what that's gone. So now I want to give an opportunity to open this up for you to give maybe a question to our two panelists.